Hello, everybody. Welcome to KFC SuperCoach TV. Heading into round 4. Al Payton here, joined by my good friend Tim Mitchell, who maybe lost an arm at some point. No, there it is. I'm not sure what's going on with his background there. But and also we have another special guest on the line. I'll get to Tim in a second about the late outs for SuperCoach TV this week. But Damo from Jock Reynolds SuperCoach community has joined us. And, I'm sure everybody who watches these knows about Jock Reynolds, one of the pioneers of SuperCoach content online. Had a podcast going for many years, and they do lots of other great work as well. And Damo is the host, I would say. Is that fair to say, of the weekly mailbag, which I just listened to this morning, which gave me a bit of insight into what to do this week and will inform some of our discussion. So great to have you on.
It's great to be here. Yeah, Clark is also there. He's also a host, but yeah, I guess I co-host it.
And I was just thinking this is a really interesting time in the season with KFC SuperCoach. So, we're 3 rounds in. I think everybody sort of lessons we learned from last year was, you don't want to sit around on your hands waiting. You just want to make aggressive moves early, and that's what a lot of people have done in the first 2 or 3 weeks. But now we're getting to a point where what do? Do we try and ease the brakes and sit back a bit, or you just keep going as hard as you possibly can? I mean, some people don't necessarily have a choice, but Tim, as we welcome you on board, where do you sort of sit with the, we just going all guns blazing till we run out of trades, or how do we do this?
Oh, Al, I couldn't dissuade people from doing that more than after my experience in the last couple of weeks. Like, as you know, I threw everything at the first couple of weeks and thought, there's a couple of really nice value options, in particular in defence, and tried to use some of the players in my team that had sort of the top values, like Rory Laird, Tom Stewart. I thought I had to get rid of after the 1 round, and tried to sort of load my team with value premiums, I guess you'd call them, guys that were maybe not quite top dollar, but I thought could score just as well as sort of some of the big dogs, in particular in defence, getting a Hayden Young and Jordan Ridley into my team, and sort of it really hasn't worked out well. But so I think, like, the vibe that I'm getting, Al, is that most people are in a position now where, like, they've taken their risks, as you said. They've gone with, like Will Setterfield last week, they've gone with some of these other mid-prices. If they jumped on, I don't know, James Warple, if they didn't have Jacob Hopper for some reason, they're likely to get him this week if they didn't get on earlier. So they've taken those risks now, but we're seeing some rookies like Cade Chandler and Noah Long and Will Ashcroft and Ruben Jinby all scoring quite well. So the vibe that I'm getting this week is that more people are prioritising getting in Clayton Oliver, getting in Tim English, making sure that they don't miss out on these guys that if you don't have the guys that are averaging 120, 130s, like, your season can pretty quickly get away from you. You're either going to cop some early league losses, or your overall ranking is going to slide because you don't have these top scorers that people are captaining most weeks. Like, we know that Melbourne have got a very friendly draw over the next 5 to 6 weeks, and the expectation is that someone like Clayton Oliver could average 130 to 140 over that if he is as good as he was against Sydney, and he was very, very good on Sunday. So, yeah, it's daunting as a non-owner, and I don't think I'll have Clayton Oliver going into this week. I've just got too many other things that I'm dealing with. But, yeah, the vibe that I'm getting around the KFC SuperCoach community, Al, is that I think people are trending away from maybe some of those riskier picks and just trying to get those big guns in sort of at any cost, which means trying to probably go at least 1 down this week and using the value of someone like Darcy Cameron maybe to swing a couple of changes and get English and Oliver in.
Damo, where do you sit on the sort of trade philosophy? I suppose the old school way of playing SuperCoach was to just try and get the good rookies in early and maybe make 1 or 2 corrections if you've picked a Sam Flanders or someone like that early on to get them out of your team. And then it's sort of sit and wait for a few weeks while everyone starts to earn a bit of cash. And then in, maybe round 6, around that time, you can sort of start looking at making some moves. But has SuperCoach changed enough that, we can just throw that all out the window, or should that still be the plan if we can do that?
Trades are still valuable, but with the extra trades this year, the 36 trades, it's allowed people to make those corrections without really starting behind the 8 ball for a lot of people. And we've seen the last few winners, they've gone really aggressive in the first few weeks, moving their team around to get it in a strong position and riding on the coattails of those players with low break evens and scoring well. So, I mean, I don't know if it's changed, but I think the mindset has the mindset has shifted a little bit at how quickly we need to upgrade our teams and get it to the point where we can just ride it throughout the season.
And what about someone like Clayton Oliver? Tim, obviously super keen to get him in. I don't have him either. And it's just, it's really painful watching him put up these massive scores every week, especially when I think pretty much everyone who didn't have him surely considered him at some point in the preseason. So we're all kicking ourselves. But, have we seen enough with someone like him? I mean, English is maybe slightly different because we'll get to the ruck shortly. There's some other stuff going on there. But, how much would you be pulling your team apart to just make sure you don't miss out on this, what we think will be an amazing run of scores from Clayton Oliver?
I mean, you don't want to go away from what you've done, what you've researched in the preseason. But I mean, I'm kicking myself. I had Clayton Oliver in my team until the day before round 1, but
yeah,
we won't go into that. I think that his price won't get too much higher than it is now at 701K. And I think there will be that game where he kind of does take it easy, pumps out a 104 instead of a 140 and drops in price a little bit, but he's probably going to be your first target when you're upgrading your midfield, and you want to get to him as quick as possible.
What about this move, Tim? I mean, this touches on something that you sort of broke some news with our late mail column, or at least maybe Mitch Cleary will give him the credit, but you picked up on it, which is good. That Will Setterfield potentially under a bit of a cloud. Have we heard any more about that today? Because it would be on trend with how KFC SuperCoach has gone this year.
Oh, well, it's going well, isn't it? So I think most people, there's more than 50,000 coaches this week trying to work out what to do with Darcy Cameron already. And I know that Damo noted, put a very good point on Twitter earlier, that if you've got Darcy Cameron in your forward line, like, you're in a very advantageous position, because for 50K, less than 50K, you could go to Luke Davies-Uniacke this week if he's back, and all signs look like he's going to play for Carlton. But yeah, on top of that, we get the news last night that Will Setterfield's still dealing with a bit of a cork, which he copped in round 1. There was some suggestion that he had sort of been, on a managed program leading into round 2, and a bit of doubt about whether he'd get up for that, but didn't have any issues playing last week and still scored 80 after a lot of coaches traded him in. But yeah, we see his sort of via 7 News last night that his quad was sort of very heavily strapped, didn't join the main group at training yesterday. And I think the only sort of advantageous thing working in Will Setterfield's favour is the fact that Essendon plays the Gold Coast on Sunday. Like, if they were playing tonight or if they were playing tomorrow night, you'd probably be a bit more stressed as a KFC SuperCoach owner about the likelihood that Will Setterfield wasn't going to play, but at least he's got until Sunday to potentially get up. So, as I noted in the late mail, I sort of have this expectation that they'll name him tonight, and then they'll probably put him through the captain's run over the weekend. I guess that'll be on Saturday, and see how he pulls up from that. They've probably got some carryover options from the VFL side anyway. Like, Ben Hobbs has been racking up disposals for fun in the State League in the first couple of rounds. So you think someone like him would probably be in the frame to come into the side if Will Setterfield was to miss. But I have seen already, Al, a few people coming up with some contingency plans as well, and thinking, can I use Will Setterfield's 400K that he is now to help me bridge that gap and help get me Clayton Oliver this week if Will Setterfield does miss? So it's going to be really interesting to see whether coaches that say hold Will Setterfield on their bench benefit because he comes back, that let's say does miss because he comes back in round 5 and continues to score well and gets closer to 500K, or if this is just about as good as we get from him, he tops out at 450K, and bridging that 300K gap by trading out Will Setterfield this week is the right move. So yeah, really interesting few days ahead, because there's more than 50, 60,000 coaches that'll have some thinking to do if Will Setterfield does miss on Sunday. Al's got his mic off, Damo, so maybe you can chat, I think. I'm surprised it took you that long.
No, I was just going to say that, just at least keep your eyes on the emergencies. It worked all right last week for people who had to cover maybe an LDU or Jacob Hopper. Fortunately, the emergencies sort of played early enough in the round, and we got to look at Oscar Baker was fantastic for a lot of teams, scoring 95 points. So the Dogs play on Saturday afternoon. So at least, if you put the E on him and he goes okay, then it probably is a little bit less stressful waiting to see if Setterfield makes the final team. I mean, my take on it is that, especially after a lot of us just brought him in, I really don't want to trade him out. Plenty more money to make. I think he can still score pretty good points for us. And the problem is, I don't know who has 200-300 grand sitting in the bank that you can go straight from Setterfield to Oliver anyway. You're going to have to pull another trade or two to make it happen. And I'm just getting a bit nervous about how many trades we're using and burning through, taking other primos out of our side that we're then going to have to try and upgrade to again later on. So there's more trades. So I think Oliver, unfortunately, I'm just going to have to sit and watch him. And as Damo said, I mean, in the past, it's been very, very rare. Like maybe Gary Ablett Jr. did it, where players would go through, I suppose Laird last year, go through an entire season without dropping a single sort of bad score. And Oliver in the past has been prone to, one game where he gets tagged or he's just off for some reason and scores a 70 or an 80. And that might be, the best we can hope for as non-owners. And then he dips, a little bit in price and we can try and look to get him in. So, unfortunately, I'll just have to watch as a non-Clayton Oliver owner for a little bit longer, I think. But the situation is a little bit different in the ruck, where a lot of people, as you mentioned, Darcy Cameron is in 50,000 teams and he has to be traded out, going to miss a month at least with a knee injury. And there's really nobody at his price or cheaper that you would contemplate bringing in. I've heard a few people mention Matthew Flynn. He's put up a couple of good scores. But, that'd be a pretty brave call. So you probably do have to use at least, certainly one trade and possibly two to get to someone good. So, Damo, do you think it is just a case of Grundy being sort of the bargain option, who's not too much more than DC, or you just do whatever you can to get Tim English into your side because he just looks so good over the first 3 rounds?
I mean, there's other options other than those two guys out there as well. There's Jared Witts around. Toby Nankervis is a good total points ruckman, so he's someone who you could get who would score solidly throughout the season. But English is the top option at the moment, and a lot of people are moving heaven and earth to bring him in, which I don't think you actually need to do. He's got a history of potentially getting concussed, or he's got a history of soft tissue injuries as well. So, I mean, are you trading into someone who could potentially miss games down the line? It's hard to say. The ruck line has been so unreliable for the past few years, and even Brodie Grundy. Simon Goodwin's come out this morning saying they're going to take a conservative approach with the Max Gawn's return, but does that just kick a problem down the road a little bit? And then you got to find out, and then you got to work out what to do with Grundy once Gawn returns and Gawn starts averaging 70 again. Yeah,
no, that's definitely the question. I suppose people might be thinking, well, it's 2 trades. I might have to use 2 trades now to get to English, whereas Grundy I could potentially do with 1 if you've got about 15K in the bank. But what's your take on this, Tim, and how, what can we expect from Grundy if he piles on the scores like we saw last week? He comes up against West Coast this weekend, who don't have any rucks at all, so you'd expect he'd go pretty massive there. Could he at least earn enough money so that when you're making that decision in a month or 5 or 6 weeks' time, you pretty much could choose any ruckman you want at that time?
Yeah, I think so, Al. It's really just a case of whether you're prepared to burn 2 trades, whether maybe you haven't used a couple of your boosts already, and you're in a position where you might be able to spare an extra trade. Let's say you started the right rookies and you didn't need to trade sideways for them, or you didn't need to jump on at Clayton Oliver because you started him. So if you're in that position where you do have that advantage where maybe you're a trade or 2 ahead of other coaches, then Brodie Grundy's definitely someone you could look at. I know I look at my team and I'll probably be sort of down around 30, 31 trades after this week because I didn't boost last week. I just got Zeeble and Setterfield, but at the same time, I'm thinking, well, I've probably got a couple of issues that I'm still dealing with in my defence that I'm not really happy with. So there's a couple of extra trades I'm already going to have to use there. I don't have Clayton Oliver. I don't have Rory Laird anymore. So that's going to cost me a couple of trades down the track. And I'm thinking, am I really going to have that extra trade up my sleeve in 4 weeks' time to get off Brodie Grundy? Like, he would have to score really well in the next 4 weeks for you to be in a position where like you'd be happy burning those 2 trades as well. I think you'd want a similar average to what we're getting every week from Jared Witts and Tim English, which based on the evidence that we saw against Sydney could happen. Like, he was really good. I think he had only 25 hit outs, but moved really well around the ground. It was back to sort of that contested Brodie Grundy that we loved at Collingwood, that was one of the top KFC SuperCoach ruckmen for 3 or 4 years. So it's really just about whether you're comfortable with where your trades are at, where your team's at, and then whether you're willing to burn sort of 2 trades, because I definitely think Brodie Grundy could score just as well or within reach of English and Witts for the next 4 weeks. But as Damo said, you're just kicking the can down the road in that in 4 weeks' time, as soon as Max Gawn comes back, Brodie Grundy's likely to be scoring 70s and 80s most weeks. So you're not going to want that in your side for very long.
And yeah, I think the thing too to just keep in mind is that in 4 to 6 weeks' time, who knows what else we'll be dealing with? There'll be, some DPPs will have come in. We might have other injuries. We'll be trying to perform upgrades. Rookies will be ready to cash in. So there'll be plenty of other things you want to be doing with your trades and with your team. And will you have a spare trade that week? When the time is right to make that switch before Grundy's price starts going down again. You might get caught with him sort of stuck in your team for longer than you really want. And yeah, it just gets a bit messy. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. I mean, Damo, is this another factor that I think Michael here is way ahead of all of us. I certainly haven't put any thought into this at all, but he's suggesting Witts actually might be a better option than English just because of his bye setup, which I guess he has the round 13 bye, I think it is, where it's only Geelong and Gold Coast. So probably not a bad week to have some primos who you can just sit on the bench and we should be able to cover them fairly easily. But would that come into your thinking at all?
I mean, thinking about the buys is always good about who you're trading in and who you're moving on and in terms of rookies and all that sort of thing. But I don't think this issue is one where you need to really bring the buys into the equation. That's not saying Witts isn't a good option. I actually think Witts is possibly a better option due to his durability, but I like the Witts selection. I like the Witts trade in. Like I said, there's more options than just Brodie Grundy and Tim English out there to fix your team.
I think Witts is $300 cheaper than English. So if you just can't quite afford English and you can afford Witts, it'd be a pretty unusual situation. But he's not a bad fallback position. What about Tim? People also getting, I think the English and Grundy talk this week has got other people with itchy trade trigger fingers as well. Someone like me who's got Sean Darcy. Hang on to him. Maybe I should ask Damo about this. What do you think Sean Darcy's prospects are going forward? Obviously, he was all right against the Eagles, but as we talked about, they're pretty decimated. Is he someone you could confidently hang on to? And then Rowan Marshall's been a little bit disappointing to start the year. A couple of scores under 100, but I suppose I've got Darcy and Marshall. I haven't considered trading Rowan Marshall out, but he's in the top 10 trade outs for the week, I think. So obviously people are making moves like this. Would you consider that to get a Grundy or an English?
I'd be loath to trade out Darcy. I've seen people doing it, and I can understand why, because 3 of his 6 halves so far, he scored about, 30 points combined or 40 points combined in those, including a half where he went the negatives. So, he's sort of the ultimate Jekyll and Hyde in KFC SuperCoach, isn't he? He can score 90 and a half, as he did in the first half against the Eagles, and everyone thought he was on for a 160, 170, and then he still scored mid-130s, which was serviceable, but couldn't dominate the game in the same way that he did in that first half. And that really has been, I guess, sort of typical of what we've seen from him so far. He has one quite poor half and then makes up for it by scoring 60 or 70 points in the second half and gets a half-decent total because of that. So I'd still be pretty loath to move him on because we know how big his ceiling is. If he gets going and puts together 3 or 4, 3.5 quarter games instead of these sort of 2 quarter games that we're seeing from him, he's going to score 120, 130, and he's going to be matching Tim English. So I feel like he could be one of those guys. If you jumped off him, he could burn you pretty quickly. And the reason that I say that is because, and I'm sure Damo would be able to give a much better insight than this, because I haven't seen a whole heap of the Dockers this year, but you look at the ruck contest numbers of him compared to Luke Jackson, and Sean Darcy's doing 70 to 75% of the ruck work for the Dockers. Luke Jackson hasn't eaten into Sean Darcy's numbers in the way that we thought it might have. Certainly in the way that we saw in round 1, for example, or in the preseason from the Gawn-Grundy combination. And I think based on that, I would just be holding on to Sean Darcy rather than going to Grundy, for example, and backing Darcy to get it all together and hopefully score similar numbers to Witts and English, the big dogs in the ruck.
Damon, we should use your Dockers expertise while we've got you on over there in the West, seeing them up close, because we've got Darcy, and then people also asking about Andy Brayshaw. What's going on with him over the first 3 rounds? Has been really performing under expectations, has lost a bit of money. Would you bail on a pick like that, or you stick with the primos that you started with?
Damo, before you jump in, can you tell me what's going on with Hayden Young as well? Is Hayden Young going to start scoring points again or not?
Hold on to Hayden Young. There's no Heath Chapman for 3 to 5 weeks, so Hayden Young could score well again. Bringing Brandon Walker in, so should switch roles around and he could get back to where he needs to be for Hayden Young. So hold on to Hayden Young for a couple more weeks to see how he goes without Chapman in the side. As for Darcy, he comes up against Riley O'Brien this week, so I would hold him to see if he can do well against a pretty evenly matched ruckman. So see how he goes there. The Dockers don't usually play that well at Adelaide Oval, but they do usually play pretty well against Adelaide. So this will be a real test to see how Sean Darcy goes. And Andy Brayshaw, he's getting attention, and he's decided to, instead of fighting through it, just removing himself and his opponent from the contest. So he's kind of playing a selfless role to help the team, and his opponent is then having to decide whether he chases the ball or chases the opponent. And more often, and when he stops chasing his opponent, Andy Brayshaw gets his hand on the ball. So we've seen Andy Brayshaw score 40, 50 points in a quarter, and then scored about 20 points for the rest of the game. So his opponent's kind of between a rock and a hard place whether to tag him or not.
So what does that mean for him as a KFC SuperCoach pick, do you think?
As a SuperCoach pick, I have to admit I jumped off him. I turned him into Clayton Oliver. So
yeah, well, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So
you got the money together.
I mean, I love him. I think he's going to be a good SuperCoach player once he works out what to do with the tag. But as it stands at the moment, with the Dockers so willing to use Aish and Jackson and Switkowski through that centre bounce setup, I don't think he's going to be a top scorer yet.
Can we just confirm, Al? Damo, you jumped off Andy Brayshaw. I never thought I would see the day. I'm pretty sure that's what I heard.
You heard correctly, yes.
Oh. It's incredible.
Well, just when you thought this KFC SuperCoach season just when you thought this season couldn't get any weirder, Al, you've got the number one Andy Brayshaw fans trading out Andy Brayshaw. It
breaks my heart, but I had to do it.
Yeah, I think, and at the moment, before his price comes down too much further, you can still get, I think the commenter had to go, that'd be a bit of a pod move, but you could get LDU and still make some money at the moment, or even Josh Kelly, who I started with, had to trade out when he got concussed, and, I'm not too upset about it because it got me Sheasel and Dacos and a few other things, but watching him last week, he was a great sort of pod pick at the start of the season, and I do wish I still had him because he's traveling pretty well, and he plays the Bombers this week. I reckon he could go pretty massive against them. Now, I'm not sure what Lachlan's source is here, but there's one we can maybe keep an eye out for. That'd be about right, wouldn't it?
I think he also said earlier, Lachlan, don't trade in Tim English. So I'm pretty sure he's just trying to keep the ownership down. He said everyone this week, Tim English will get injured. Don't pick him. So
yeah, right.
That screams to me. I want to keep his ownership under 50%, which is probably unlikely to happen. Sorry, Lachlan.
Yeah, no, he's going to be in a lot of teams. We'll quickly try and get through some more questions. One for you, Tim. We discussed this a bit on our podcast. Sam wants to know, Will Day has been scoring really well in the midfield. His price is awkward. Where, could you go up to him or down to him from if you've seen a few people trading out Sam Doherty, is that an option?
I don't know if I trade Sam Doherty to him, but I do like him as an option. He's had 22 disposals and more in all 3 games so far. Quality ball user. I know that his round 1 score against Essendon doesn't really jump off the page. I think he scored about 60 that day, but his past 2 performances have been really good, 98 in round 2 and then the big 139 in round 3. So it has to be this week if you want Will Day. I know that our dual position player updates article, our sort of first look at the watch list is up on all the News Corp and Code Sport websites now, and Will Day is one of those names that is expected to gain DPP as well after round 5. So he's got that going for him. It could mean that if you're still stuck with Charlie Constable or Campbell Chesser, who's now going to miss more than a month with a knee issue, come sort of round 5, round 6 period, and you wanted to trade in a defender, for example, you could swing Will Day from your defence to your midfield, play him at M7 or M8 for a few weeks while you sort out a few other issues. So you sort of can't underestimate the importance of, how important it can be in some instances to have that flexibility in your KFC SuperCoach team. And that's one of the reasons I like him as well. But yeah, if you want to get on him, has to be this week because he's going to be closer to 450K next week. And I wouldn't be paying that much.
mean, one question we haven't really talked about all week is a lot of people have Chesser and Constable, and now, we know Chesser's out for a while, and Constable, who knows, hopefully he can get back into the team. He got, I think, 30 touches in the VFL, but seems like he's very much on the fringe. I mean, are we just hanging on to these guys? I mean, we can't really do much with them because they're not worth anything, but sort of not ideal to have 2 zero-scoring players on the bench.
No, Campbell Chess is perfect for a loophole this week, Al. Eagles play late on Sunday, so you'd be pretty happy with that. I think, as you mentioned, I'll probably use him to have a look at Oscar Baker's score, and then I think there's potential. It works out this week. I'm sure it won't be work out as nicely in coming weeks, but depending on Ruben Jimmy, we know is really popular and scoring well. So let's say Darcy Wilmot scored well tonight, and you had Ruben Jinby in your defence. I know I do. So the idea will probably be swing someone like Charlie Constable back, as long as he's not sort of named. I reckon we might have that issue again where he's in the 26, although Alex Sexton's been doing a pretty good job as the sub for the Suns, and you wouldn't think based off a win against Geelong that they're too likely to change their 23. So I'll probably have a look at Darcy Wilmot tonight. If I like his score, use either Chesser or Constable as my loophole in defence, and then whichever one I don't go with, I'll have a look at Oscar Baker, and if I want his score, I'll stick them at M8 and take Oscar Baker's score like many of us did last week.
And Damo, we're talking about rookies. If people wanted to bring in a rookie this week, which I think might be the play for a few people to get the money to get from Cameron up to a Tim English type. There's a few names floating around. Probably would say none that is a clear standout. So Matt Murphy here asking, would you bring in Van Rooyen a week early after just the one game? Looked really good last week for the Demons, but he gets another game before his price moves, but maybe you have to do it this week to get the money. Then we've got Harry Rouston from the Giants is another option in the midfield. Is about 140K. I probably wouldn't be getting Samson Ryan and Tyler Young if he plays this week, are both on the bubble for Richmond, but both sort of pretty low scoring options. But he's also thrown out the Amati party. Dan Batten's man, Joel Amati, scored about 130, I think. 122 and 80 in his 2 games, and has a really big negative break even, but he's a little bit more expensive, just over the sort of 200K mark. Is he someone you could consider, or what are your sort of thoughts on the rookies this week?
The thing that scares me about Joel Amati is John Longmire has been reluctant to play him and Lance Franklin in the same side, and with Sydney's poor performance against Melbourne on the weekend, is he going to be the one that slides out of that team when they make the adjustments? So I'm not as sold on Amati as other people. I'm not sure he holds his spot as well as we think he does, despite his good performances. Jacob Van Rooyen, I think needs to. I think we need to wait until he's on the bubble. It appears like he's going to play as long as Max Gawn is out, but you have to remember that Tom McDonald is also hanging around and could force the change there as well. So yeah, I'm reluctant to pick up rookies before they're on the bubble.
No, I've got a good feeling about Van Rooyen now. I reckon he's going to kick 4 or 5 this week.
Against the Eagles, yeah.
It's against a depleted Eagles side. There's going to be so much ball in that attacking 50 for Melbourne. I've just got this good feeling. I've got this good feeling he's going to go 80 plus. It doesn't really work with my structure because I've still got Caminiti and Fergus Green sitting there. But I would love to be in a position where I could get Van Rooyen to F6 this week, because I think he's going to score quite well against the Eagles.
Trevor, so you got on. That is a great pick to start with. Jack Buckley, I think he's in 3% of teams. Has been fantastic for the Giants. 3 sort of scores in the 90s. I don't think I'd be going on him after he's gone up 70K already, even though he does look like a pretty sort of stable money maker. What about if you didn't get Cade Chandler, another guy who could go well against the Eagles this weekend? Could you get him a week late? What about, so Joe must have the situation you mentioned earlier of Cameron maybe at his forward line, downgrade to Chandler, and then you can, that frees up a huge amount of cash to, you could even get from a Warple maybe to a top line midfielder or something like that.
Yeah, I like it. But projections, Damo, you probably know better than me, but I think projections still have Chandler, as long as he scores sort of 60s or 70s in the next 3 or 4 weeks, he's in line to make that 150K sort of minimum that you'd want for trading him in. So if you think he's going to get to anywhere between 350 and 400K, there's no issue with, it does frustrate you having to pay a fair bit more than other coaches did, but at the same time, you're still going to get some value out of this pick and hopefully some good points on field as well.
Yeah, for sure. Bryce Mitchell has Kay Chandler sort of maxing out at about 380k, so that's pretty good.
And Damo, quickly, one other name that we were pretty hot on a week ago, but he's sort of fallen off the radar. Jack Bowe's on the bubble as well. He's I suppose similar price to Jack Buckley. I mean, I'm not sure how you're getting him really, but is he someone you would be wanting to get into your team if you could, or are we just not sold on his role and his job security at the Cats?
I don't know if his job security is an issue, but I'm not sure of his role. He seems to score about 22 points in a half, and then has like a 60-point quarter. So there's going to be a game where he doesn't have that big boost in a quarter, doesn't have that role change within a game, and finishes on 30 points. So yeah, I'm not sold on him at his price.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Now we're going to get into some captaincy talk. So it will be Friday night. The footy is on, and your KFC Friday night feast is on its way. Score free delivery on your Friday night footy feast every Friday when ordering through the KFC app or kfc.com.au. It's game on. So when we're looking at Friday night footy, we're obviously looking at some early VC options, and obviously Thursday night we've got a pretty good game as well. Tim, anyone you like? It's, I think if you've got Clayton Oliver, you're sitting pretty happy with who you could whack the captaincy on. But apart from that, it's pretty open field this week.
Yeah, I think if you've got Oliver, like you can and Marcus Bontempelli as well, who's up against the Tigers, I think you can pretty safely VC the Bont on Saturday night. And then if for some reason he doesn't score sort of 125, 130, you'd be pretty happy going with Clayton Oliver against the Eagles on Sunday, who looks a pretty safe bet for that sort of 125 score. So as we just noted there are a few good options tonight, but at the same time, I think the safe bet is sort of to go down that Bont Oliver path this week if you've got both of those players. I don't have Oliver, so I've currently got my VC on Josh Dunkley tonight. But I think it's just ready for sort of that massive game. We haven't really seen it yet. I think he's got 3 scores between about 108 and 115, so he hasn't quite hit the captaincy threshold. But Collingwood don't tag, and I think he's sort of really going to step up on this sort of big Easter Thursday stage for the Lions. So we know he's got a big ceiling, and at the very least, I've sort of got Bont there as a fallback option. But I know Sam said, Sam Cambereri said he's going to go Sam Doherty as the VC, and I do like that as well. I traded out Doc last week, and that was only to get Setterfield and Zeeble into my side before they rocketed up in price. But I don't think he's ever sort of going to score 85 points off 39 disposals again. And the fact that he was finding so much of the footy has to be a good sign as well. So you got Carlton under the roof against North Melbourne. I think Sam Doherty's one of those guys that could have an absolute field day and sort of really set you up well. So if I didn't trade him last week, I'd be very hesitant to trade Sam Doherty this week because I think he's in for a massive game against North Melbourne, and I can definitely understand people that are thinking about putting the VC on him tomorrow as well.
Who do you like, Damo? And Matt Murphy will get him back in here because he's suggested a name which I think I heard on the mailbag as well. Someone who's averaging about 115 over. He's the number 1 scoring forward in KFC SuperCoach so far this year. Should we start thinking about Harry Sheezel as a captaincy or a VC option?
I'm tempted by Harry Sheezel. I mean, if he pumps out another 114, 115 points, you'd probably take it. I mean, and it's not as if he can't do it. We've seen him do it 3 weeks in a row now, playing that role, and it's tempting. I don't know if I'll actually do it. I want to do it, and part of me wants to do it just for the fun of it, but because you don't have to take the score being the VC score. But I haven't nailed my captains for any of the first 3 rounds, so I think I need to play it a little bit safer and look at Bont as my vice captain against Richmond, who don't really tag. They sort of just trust their system, and then Clayton Oliver against the depleted Eagles is probably the safest option, probably the safest safety net there as well.
The other one that Matt mentions here is the guy that I picked at the start of the year just so I'd have a safe captain option every week, and it hasn't really worked out that way. But how does Laird go against the Dockers normally?
I mean, the Dockers centre bounce setup has kind of been struggling lately, so he could have some really good clearance, get some really good points from clearances and stoppage work. So I think he's going to be a good option as well.
Yeah, I might just look at the order of the games. I might have to VC him almost and then have Bont as the backup.
Hopefully James Aish goes and saddles up next to him and puts the clamps on him.
And yeah, I think that they're sort of the top options this week. I was going to wrap up with I saw someone actually asked me this morning about a trade that he had in mind, and it was a name that you mentioned during the week as well, Tim. We talk about Melbourne and how they could go in this week, particularly against the Eagles, and then over the next few rounds. Cozzy Pickett scored about 140 in round one, and he's back. And I saw Simon Goodwood said today he's going to go straight back into the midfield. What is he, 350K in the forward line? Would that be the craziest move you could make?
Well, the main reason that I brought this up, Al, is because I was just looking for sort of any avenue to get myself into the run that Melbourne have in the next 5 or 6 weeks, which they should blitz just about every team that they play in that period. And then the other team that I sort of really like the run of the next month or so, and I'm sorry to all my Carlton fans if this turns out terribly, but I like Carlton's run on paper should be really good for sort of the Blues top KFC SuperCoach scorers as well. Let's just put the sort of potential results to one side because we know Carlton refuses to win a game by more than a couple of goals. So, I look at both those teams, in particular Melbourne, like that. I was trying, as you know, I was talking to you about Christian Petrarca earlier in the week and thinking, can I find a way at under 600K, I think it is now, to get Christian Petrarca into my side because he's a point of difference. Like, yes, he doesn't score anywhere near as consistently in KFC SuperCoach as Clayton Oliver, but he's got a massive ceiling. I think Mark Robinson said in his top 50 where he had him ranked as, I think, number 2 behind Charlie Curnow, that had just about his best preseason going into this year. And I think he's had one score under 100 so far, or maybe his first couple were, but some big numbers last week against the Swans that suggests he might be just on the cusp of something pretty special. But like Cozzy, he looked really good in round one. He's not going to kick 4 goals every week, so you wouldn't want to be sort of expecting anywhere near the 130s, 140s that he produced in round one every week. But at the same time, extra midfield minutes, loves to tackle, can kick goals, can impact in big moments as well. Like, he ticks a lot of the boxes for KFC SuperCoach. But then I think there's going to be some highs like we saw in round one, but it would not shock me if he drops a 30 or 40 one week as well, just because he's still sort of that enigmatic player that can drop in and out of games. So I feel like he'd be a really fun pick if you're just playing not for overall rankings or anything, and you just want to jump on a player that's really fun to watch. Definitely get on Cozzy Pickett, but it's a pick that'll probably come with sort of the odd week of frustration as well as some big highs as well.
Yep, and we'll leave it, Damo, with someone, Travis here suggested another big pod that I've heard floated a couple of times this week, not at the Dockers, but over in the West. SPS, he might be one of the last men standing at the Eagles and scored pretty well the last couple of rounds. Could he be an option in KFC SuperCoach?
I haven't watched him play. I haven't really paid attention to him, to be honest. I thought he was still playing in the Waffle, so.
I think he scored about 120 last week.
Yeah, I didn't notice him.
Have you followed his progress since he left Carlton, Tim?
No, I can't say I have all that closely. Although, speaking of Carlton, I just seen a flag for Luke Davies-Uniacke owners that Michael Voss apparently said this morning that if LDU plays, he's a definite watch in inverted commas for some attention. So I think I wasn't putting any sort of juju out there or trying to jinx all his owners because they had it tough enough last week. But I did have this suspicion that Ed Curnow might go straight to Luke Davies-Uniacke if he did play, because Ed Curnow is sort of that player that Carlton have been relying on in the clinches, and it doesn't sound like Sam Walsh is going to be back until next week now. So just do not be surprised if Ed Curnow plays on Luke Davies-Uniacke tomorrow. And like we're talking captains, maybe that's something that might dissuade you from putting the VC on LDU. Although then again, like we watched it pretty closely last week, Ed Curnow tried to go to Josh Kelly, and Josh Kelly did what he usually does against Carlton and ended up scoring close to 150. So maybe with the form LDU's been in, any sort of tag won't have all that much impact on Good Friday anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another thing that we were worrying about in pre-season. We're worrying about Tim English's soft tissue injuries, and we're worried about Nick Dacos and worrying about taggers all over the joint. And it hasn't really been a factor as yet. So still could happen, but even Finn McGuinness got subbed off last week, although maybe he would have tagged LDU if he'd played. But yep, trying to remember what's for pre-season next year.
Can Finn please go to Tom Stewart on Monday? I cannot watch Tom Stewart for 165 again. Remembering that he was in my round one side, like Sam Mitchell,
that's
if you are listening, Sam, please put Finn McGuinness on Tom Stewart on Monday.
All right, we'll wrap things up there. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Damo, for jumping on. Of course, Jock Reynolds, go and check out their podcast and all the great work they do around KFC SuperCoach. Good luck, everybody. Hopefully this week we just have a really boring round with no laid-outs. Everybody just scores quite well, and there's nothing absolutely chaotic that we have to deal with. But, it's been a pretty interesting year so far. So everybody sort of copped some of it. I think it's just a matter of trying to skate through and make the best of the situation.
What about Happy Easter to all the KFC SuperCoaches?
Well, exactly. And the Phantom has taken off, had an Easter day off early today. So that's why he says he's not here today, although I'm not sure, given how his season's going. He might be off doing a mini pre-season of his own, I think.
Still stuck in the fetal position in the lair, I hear. So struggling to recover.
Been pretty rough. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And we'll be back again soon.